going to take you through a system that I just recently built for the district that I work in, and that's kind of centered around MTSS and the different tiers, especially for academics, behavior, and attendance in this situation. So we're going to start with this kind of flow chart, and we're going to use it to just kind of guide us through this system. This is by no means a perfect system, but it's a nice way to keep things organized and to kind of keep track of what you're doing to help support each of the students that may be falling into those tier 2 and tier 3s for academic behavior or attendance. We typically tend to look at class grades in the secondary level. This is not the only data point that we look at, but it is one of our initial data points. If we see that that there is a student that is failing multiple classes, and of course we want to make sure that they're getting the support that they need, and we also want to determine exactly why that student is failing multiple classes or just failing one class. Another thing that we are looking at is how many students or how many students are failing a class. So if you have several students failing a class, if you have more than 20%, then perhaps it's not a student or a learner problem, but more like an instructional curriculum or environment problem. So that's something else that we're looking at as well. But like I said, this just kind of pulls it all together. So we are going to start with the grade analysis form. All right, so this is going to just be like our one-stop shop for all class failures within the school. So this is just pulling us. Eventually we will start pulling in D's as well. And of course, this is not, like I said before, this is not the only data point that we're looking at. So the goal here is not to just look at students who are failing one or more course, but it's definitely a starting point. So we have student names, grade level, course, the section of the course, teacher, letter grade, percentage. This unique code, you don't really have to worry about that. That's something that's just built there for my system. And then we'll talk about the rest as we go through it. This, like I said, is listing just the students that have failed those courses. Of course, these are all random student names, so you don't have to worry about seeing student data here. These are not our students. So what a teacher is going to do is find their list of courses and list of students, and they are organized by teacher and then by section. And they're just going to go down the list and fill out teacher form. Now, we're doing this every 7 weeks. We are on a modified trimester schedule next year. So we have 2 14-week trimesters and then a 7-week trimester as our third trimester. It's kind of a unique situation that we're trying out next year. Lots of benefits, but that's another story. So we're doing this every 7 weeks. So that's mid-trimester and end of trimester. Okay, so this pulls in around mid-trimester, and the teachers then go through here and fill out the teacher form for each of these students. So that's Sam, Miss Anderson. I'm looking at Timmy here. I'm going to go to this form. It's going to go ahead and put a unique code there. I don't have to worry about that. All I need to do is mark the supports and strategies that I've already provided. Let's say I did a learning contract, I give them breaks, and I do some cooperative learning, and my hypothesis as to why the student is failing. So I'm going to say attendance. The student is very rarely at school, so I'm going to mark attendance. Additional notes, you can put anything there that you'd like. Student was at school 1 day in past 3 weeks. And I'm going to click submit. Easy enough. They're going to go through and fill that in for each of their students. And you'll see that in a second, it'll pop up here that there has been a teacher form filled out for that student. It might move a little slowly right now because whenever I'm trying to do a loom during these things, of course, it slows everything down. So that's the first step, is just the teachers to fill out the teacher forms. This is all done ahead of their grade level meeting, so this is done independently. The intervention specialist and counselor is going to come in here and put their own notes for each of the students if they have any notes. Again, that is done separately, independently, before the grade level meeting. All right, so that brings us, right now we have teachers fill out teacher form, ISs and counselors fill out their additional notes, and then we get to our grade level meeting. During the grade level meeting, we then go through each student and we try to determine what is the main reason that student is failing. Okay, because in the secondary situation, a lot of times it is not necessarily due to the fact that that student has an academic deficit. It could be due to a behavioral issue. It could be due to an attendance issue. So what we're going to do is go through and say, looks like I've marked all of these students. Okay, let's go back to Timmy. Timmy's issue, remember, is an attendance issue. Okay, when we check that box, what's going to happen is it's going to pop up a little form here. That form, as long as you see those links, that means that form needs to be filled out for that student. If the form has already been filled out, so you can see here, this is an academic issue for Cora. She has a link, but Doug has an academic issue marked and he does not have a link. That's because his form has already been filled out. Okay, so this really just narrows down to the forms that you actually still need to fill out as a group. And again, remember this is done in GLT. I'm going to go ahead and also mark a student for a behavior issue. The information that we have in between these columns for the academic issue, there is going to be some more data that's linked in there beginning next year. We're going to have the iReady domain data, so you'll be able to see the student scores in each domain. We do have a standards dashboard that gives all the grade level standards and whether or not that student has mastered them either through iReady diagnostic tests or through our Teacher 3D forms, which you could see more about that on my website. And then the current academic tier. And the tiers can be changed at any point using this change tier link. For behavior, they have current behavior tier. Again, you can change the tier at any point. So let's say we want to change Vera's tier. It puts the student name in there. Behavior, we're going to change her to tier 2. Next, submit. And that'll change her, as you can see, to tier 2. For attendance, we will have it linked in here so that it shows the school absences, tardies, and of course the current attendance tier. So all that data is going to be in there. Clearly we don't have data for these students because they're all just made up. All right, so let's go through each of these forms and I'll kind of show you on the flow chart what that looks like. So again, we're trying to figure out what is the specific reason for that student. And it could be more than one reason. That student could appear on the academic tracker, behavior tracker, and attendance tracker. It's not necessarily just going to be one solid issue. Okay, so we already checked off the issue for each of these. The next thing to do is to fill out the academic intervention form or behavior or attendance, depending on what the issue is. So I'm going to show you what those forms look like. Say for academic intervention form, we're going to fill this out. Again, we are in GLT as we're filling this out. All that gets put in there already. We're going to say that she has a math deficit. Standard, let's say 7NS1A. Intervention resource that we are using is iReady. Student goal is to complete something, not going to focus on that. Frequency of intervention, the student, we're going to start with once a week and we're going to progress monitor, so we're going to track that once a week. And the intervention is actually going to happen with the teacher listed above. So that teacher in this case is Ms. Anderson. We also have what I need bells, so those are an additional resource for us to use for these academic deficits and interventions that we're using to support that. I'm going to click submit. And that's going to add that student then to our academic tracker. All right. Let's go ahead and go to the academic intervention tracker. And you can see that we already have a list of students here. And I'm trying to remember which student that was. Deborah. Okay. So for Deborah, you can see that I added her name to the intervention tracker. I think I added her name in a couple different spots just to replace another student's name. So that's why you see her down here. But the one that we entered is actually right up here. Oh no, I entered for Cora. Okay. So Cora is there. You can see the date that we added her. If we were to change her tier, it would show up here. We chose content math, standard skill, intervention resource goal. It has all of that there, the frequency of both intervention and progress monitoring, and then it has the sheet link. So what this is going to do overnight, every night, is it's going to create a tab for each teacher that needs one. Okay, so if it sees their name on the list, then that means that teacher needs a tab. And so then it's going to go ahead and add the students that need to be added to that teacher's tab. That teacher is going to use that tab to progress monitor for that particular student. All they're going to do is once a week or twice a week, depending on the frequency that that was chosen on the form, they're going to come in here and say, she had 35%, we did lesson 1.5. Overnight, that's going to pull that data back into kind of like an archived system, and that shows up on a separate dashboard. I'm not going to pull up the dashboard for you right now because it is linked to all of our actual students, but it just shows a graph and a list of all the lessons that they've completed so that they can have a good idea of whether or not it's helping that student succeed. So that all kind of happens in the background. Again, the teachers are only having access to their own tabs, and they will use these tabs to progress monitor. You can see that these teachers no longer have a student in there, probably because I changed all the names. Once that student has been progress monitored for 7 weeks, again, we're doing this on a 7-week cycle, then it's going to pop up that that student needs to be reviewed. And that is going to be done using the review progress link. I'm just going to point out real quick over here as well that it shows the last progress monitor date. Obviously, it doesn't show one for core because we have not pushed that data into the archive just yet. It's still living on the teacher tab. Okay, so I'm going to go to review progress. Puts all this information in here. And then it says, based on the student's data, results indicate. Okay, and we have effective, ineffective, and questionable progress. I'm going to pop over here because that's when we get to the bottom half of this flowchart. You have effective progress. Effective progress, you have 3 options for that. Either the student remains in the current intervention for an additional 7 weeks, so it just adds another row to that tracker for that student. The student exits intervention is adjusted to either tier 1 or tier 2. Again, this form is going to ask you those questions and it will adjust the tiers automatically for you. Ineffective and questionable progress, those are both the same. You have 4 options there. Student remains in the current intervention. Again, it'll duplicate that row on the tracker. There's a change to the intervention design. I'll show you that in a minute. Or you're doing an additional problem-solving meeting or a referral process meeting. And both of those are going to ask for an email, and it's just going to send a reminder to that person telling them, hey, don't forget to set up this this meeting so that we can check out the student's data, whether or not they need to be referred, or whether or not we need to do ISO RIOT, which is an MTSS problem-solving process. All right, so back to the reviewing. Like I said before, I'm going to show you not effective. We'll go ineffective next, and we're going to say that we want to change the intervention design. What this is going to do is it's going to go ahead and pull in all the information that was already there so that you can just make modifications to that information. It's also going to ask for a possible hypothesis for the questionable or ineffective data. Let's say instead of ELA, we're going to use Orrin-Gillingham. Or instead of iReady, we're going to use Orrin-Gillingham. And this time we're going to switch it up to twice a week. And we're going to change the student to tier 3. I'm going to click next. This form does all of that for me. I do not need to go back and change anything on this form or on this tracker. It's going to go ahead and put that student into tier 3. It's going to add another line of data for that student. Let me see if I can kind of show you how to do that right now. Well, you wouldn't know. You wouldn't need to know how to do it. You would just need to know that it's done. So that would all be done in the background every once in a while with the script that I have running. But again, that's not, you having to come over here and press run is not something that would need to be done. It might be mad at me again because I switched all of the names. But what that would do is add another line above here for that student with just a little bit changed. All right. Another thing that that's going to do is after it adds that additional line, it's also going to mark this as no longer monitoring. It's not doing either of those things, so I'm sure it's an issue with the fact that I changed all the names, but that is what it is going to do. Okay, the next thing that we have on there is the behavior intervention form. Again, very similar. You have the student name. This time it's going to ask what is the main behavior that should be addressed. So that student is sleeping in class. That is a behavior. What is the root cause of this behavior? Maybe the student works after school until midnight. And another thing that's going to happen, or that's going to help with this, are those counselor and IS notes as well. Interventions that have already been completed, yeah, we've called home, or no, these are the interventions that we're going to put in place. We're going to call home. Sorry, we're going to do a refer to counselor. Any additional information you can add here. You can add a student goal, point person. So I'm going to add myself to that name or to that line, and then deadline. So this is by tomorrow. I want to make sure that I have referred the student to the counselor and that we have called home. And that's all going to go to a behavioral tracker. All of these look very similar. The main difference are the colors, which I have also lined up with the flow chart. You can see that this is kind of like the bluish green. You have the purple, the gray, and the green. So again, we're working on behavior, so that's the gray one. Adds a line to this list. So that's Vera. We can see here that she was sleeping in class. All the information. We have her interventions listed. And again, what this is going to do is add a sheet similar to the academic tracker. So the point person is myself. So that means that once this gets refreshed overnight, it's going to add that student to my list with the goal. And I'm going to keep track of how many Fs that student has. You can change the data point if you would rather have something other than number of Fs, that's fine. That's just what we chose to look at. All right, so that gives you the behavior. And then the last one is the attendance intervention form. And the attendance intervention form, again, puts the student name in, gives you a list of interventions. So let's say we're going to do an incentive for attending. And we also want to catch them up using study tables. Additional interventions, student goal, I'm just going to put anything there. Point person is Lane. Deadline, let's say, is Wednesday. Click submit. And what that's going to do then is add to the attendance tracker. Remember, attendance is the green. So we're going to bring up the attendance tracker. And we can see there that it already has that student listed. It will show the current number of absences and tardies. This one, instead of having additional sheets for each teacher, her point person for that student, that point person just needs to monitor the attendance. We have a dashboard that keeps track of all the attendance where they can see the trends in that student's attendance. They're going to use that dashboard link here, and they're going to keep track so that they're ready to review the progress after that 7-week cycle and determine whether or not those supports are helping that student. Both the behavior and the attendance have the review link just like the academic. Very, very similar. The questions are slightly different on them just because it's not an academic issue. But other than that, the only thing that I hadn't mentioned over here was that it does show up excuse me, that a review is due when the review is due. So then in GLT, they can determine whether or not to focus on filling out the new form or doing the review, or they can split those tasks to try to get through that a little bit faster. I do also have a to-do list on here that's going to show the number of teacher forms that still need to be filled out. Students who need to be classified as either an academic attendance or behavioral issue, so they can keep track of whether or not they still have to classify any of those students. and then it shows the number of forms that still need to be filled out for all academic behavior and attendance. I think that covers it. Like I said, it's a lot. That's why I made this flow chart. It actually shows what columns to fill out and everything. Again, teacher fills out the form, IS and counselors add notes before the GLT meeting. GLT meeting comes and they go through each student. Is it an issue with academic deficit, low attendance, or specific repeated behavior? And then they follow each of those trackers, fill out the forms, track. There's a 7-week cycle, and then they get to the GLT meeting again, and that's where they review the progress for each of those students that have been in that 7-week cycle. And they determine whether or not to keep them in the same intervention, change it up, or exit and adjust the tier, and either do an ISO, write additional problem-solving meeting, or referral process. I think that's it. If you have any questions, let me know. Like I said, this is a complicated system, but we're super excited to use it. I've already worked through it with some of the students, and everything is just super organized and intuitive and easy to keep track of, and that's what I like about it. Oh, the one thing that I did forget to mention is that there's also a way to add students to each of those forms outside of the grade tracker. So if a student has a need identified outside of the grade analysis form, then they can follow this link to add the student. Same thing for the behavior. So let's say we're looking at iReady diagnostic data. You can add a student just based on their iReady diagnostic, even if they're getting A's in the classes. That we know that that does not necessarily mean that they don't have a deficit there. Same thing for behavior. They may be getting all A's, but there's a specific behavior that they need to track so that we can progress monitor. Same thing for attendance. And I think that's it. If you have any questions, reach out. My email is jessicalane8817@gmail.com, and my website is actually the reverse of that, 8817jessicalane.com. So feel free to check out the other stuff that I have on there. I love creating things like this. If you have any ideas, let me know. Because like I said, I'm excited to play around on these sheets. And all this goes into dashboards on Google Data Studio, which you should all know. I love that as well. And I think that's it. All right. Have a good rest of your day.